I was never given this lesson in school. I was never shown this principle in the classroom. No textbook ever opened my mind to it. No teacher ever whispered it into my ear, and yet it is the foundation of everything the wealthy build you see there. Is a rule the rich pass down like a sacred flame? A rule that is not wrapped in money itself, but in the way they think, the way they see, the way they speak to themselves, the way they raise their children. Rule is not about hard work, because millions work hard and never become rich. It is not about education, because countless degrees have never opened the vaults of financial freedom. It is not about luck, because the rich do not leave wealth to chance. They leave it to instruction, they leave it to mindset, they leave it to repetition, and they leave it early. This rule is the first law. The wealthy teach their children, and most never hear it once in a lifetime, because the system is not built to pass it on. The system rewards obedience. It does not reward original thought. It trains memorization, but it never empowers vision. And this is where the separation begins from one generation to the next, between those who create wealth and those who only chase it. This rule does not exist. On the surface, it is deep, so deep that only the intentional ever discover it, and once it is discovered, nothing ever looks the same. Magi learned it late, but once I did, everything shifted, and I am passing it to you now. I want you to hear me with your full attention, not with the ears of a casual listener, but with the soul of someone who is ready to break cycles, ready to reprogram old beliefs, ready to teach something new to your future, because your future begins with what you choose to believe. Right now, this is not information. This is transformation. This is not content. This is reconditioning. And if you stay with me, I will give you something the world never gave you, but what the wealthy give their children from day one. This is the number one rule the rich teach their children, and this is the lesson you were never taught but are about to learn. The first time I understood wealth, I realized it had nothing to do with money. Money was the result, money was the fruit, but the root was invisible. The root was planted long before the harvest ever showed itself, and that root lived in the mind. See, poor minds chase money, rich minds create it. Poor minds react to life, rich minds shape it. Poor minds wait to be told what to do, rich minds decide who they will become. And they teach this to their children from the beginning. I was taught how to earn, but never how to think. I was taught how to save, but never how to see opportunities. I was taught to avoid risk, but never how to understand it. And so I lived in fear. Fear of loss, fear of trying, fear of failure, fear of success. But the wealthy, they teach their children one powerful truth from the start. The world is not fixed, the world is flexible, and the mind is the tool that bends it. Not with tricks, not with shortcuts, but with principles. And the first principle is this: you become what you believe, not what you want, not what you say, not what you study. You become what you hold as true inside yourself. Because the inner truth you accept becomes the outer world you experience. Every wealthy parent knows this. They imprint it into their children, not through lectures, but through repetition, through vision, through modeling. They show their children the mindset of possibility, and over time, that mindset becomes identity. And that identity becomes action, and those actions create legacy. You may not have been taught this, but you can teach it to yourself now, and you can teach it to the next version of you. To the you that wakes up tomorrow, to the you that stops settling, to the you that begins acting like a person of wealth. Long before the money ever comes, because wealth does not come to the hands first, it comes to the mind first. It comes to the mind first, it comes to the one who knows what they are becoming, even when the world doubts it, even when the mirror cannot see it, even when the past tries to stop it. The rich teach their children to see themselves as creators, and creation begins in thought. Not someday, but now. You may think inheritance is measured in money. You may believe it is passed through bank accounts or trust funds, but the true inheritance of the wealthy is mental, it is emotional, it is invisible, it is the blueprint. They pass through conversation, through how they respond to problems, through how they explain setbacks, through how they frame life, through how they speak about money, and how they never speak as victims. This is the quiet inheritance, the one that cannot be taxed, the one that cannot be stolen, the one that lasts longer than any business, the one that builds businesses. You see, when I was young, I was told that rich people had secrets, that they were lucky, that they were greedy, but the truth is far more dangerous than that. The truth is they were taught, they were programmed, they were raised with a mindset that most never receive, and that mindset made them powerful before they had power. It made them calm before they had wealth. It made them certain before they had results. And that certainty created results. I did not receive that inheritance as a child, but I began giving it to myself as a man, and you can too, because nothing stops a mind that decides to re-educate itself. Nothing blocks a soul that refuses to stay in the pattern it was born into. The wealthy teach their children this rule: never think like the crowd, because the crowd does not lead, it follows. The crowd does not create, it copies. The crowd does not grow, it waits. And when you wait, life decides for you, but when you lead, you decide for life. That is the real inheritance, the mindset of leadership, the mindset of vision, the mindset of unshakable belief in self-note. One may have passed this to you, but you can be the one who starts it. You can be the root, you can be the first. You can be the one your future children point to and say, that is where it began. That is what the rich teach. They do not just build wealth, they build minds that build wealth, and that is your new inheritance if you choose to accept it there. was a time in my life when I believed that life happened to me, that the circumstances around me were the reasons. I struggled that the economy was to blame, that the system was to blame, that the doors were too locked, that the mountain was too high. But one day I heard a different thought, a dangerous thought, a powerful thought, and it changed everything. I realized that the rich do not see life as something that happens to them. They see it as something they own. They teach their children this from the beginning. Own your time, own your reactions, own your results, own your mind, own your life. One shift changes the entire game, because when you own your mind, no one else can rent it. When you own your day, distractions lose their power. When you own your future, you begin designing it on purpose. The average person waits for permission. The wealthy teach their children to grant it to themselves. The average person seeks validation. The wealthy raise children who validate their own value from within. You may not have learned this rule as a child, but you are not a child anymore, and the moment you choose to take ownership, you become powerful in a way no external system can stop. Ownership is the first step toward wealth, because it means you take control of your inner world. And when your inner world is disciplined, your outer world bends to ITI. Do not say this as theory. I say this as someone who lived both sides. I was once afraid to take ownership. I once pointed fingers. I once gave excuses, but I realized excuses were expensive. They cost me time. They cost me growth. They cost me peace. And I made a decision, a real one, not a wish, not a hope, a commitment. I decided that I would own every second, every word, every habit, every belief, every dollar, every setback, every outcome, because ownership makes you the author of your life, and authors write endings. No one expects. The rich teach this principle with silence, with how they live, with how they respond to difficulty, and those responses become identity. That identity becomes destiny. Now it is your turn. There was a season in my life where every dollar I earned felt like a rescue. I would hold on to it, protect it, cling to it like a lifeline. And without realizing it, I was teaching my mind that money was scarce, that there was never enough, that earning meant survival, not expansion. But then I stepped into another world, the world of those who multiply, and I saw something that shattered every belief I once had. The wealthy do not teach their children how to survive. They teach them how to multiply. They do not say protect it. They say grow it. They do not say hold on. They say send it to work. This is the rule. They understand, and this is what they train into their children's minds from the very beginning, that money is a tool, that tools are meant to be used, that fear is the enemy of multiplication, and that growth requires boldness. I had to rewire myself to think like this, to stop seeing money as a savior, and to start seeing it as a servant, to stop seeing spending as loss, and to start seeing it as planting, because the rich are not afraid to invest, they are afraid to stay the same. They are not afraid to risk, they are afraid to regret. So they teach their children that multiplication begins with decision. Decide to think big, decide to learn, decide to try, decide to refine, decide to grow. I remember when I made my first real decision to multiply. It was not about the amount, it was about the mindset. It was about asking, how can I make this create more? How can I turn 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into freedom? This mindset changed my walk. It changed my questions, it changed my actions, it changed my environment, and slowly it changed my reality. The rich pass this on like a code that says, we do not shrink, we expand, we do not play small, we multiply, we do not live in fear, we operate in Vijunu. May not have been raised with this thinking, but you can raise yourself into it now. You can become the multiplier. You can be the one who changes the story for every generation after you. Not by saving every cent, but by shifting every thought. And the shift begins the moment you stop asking, how do I hold on, and start asking, how do I grow? I once believed that mindset alone was enough, that if I changed how I thought, everything around me would follow. But I learned a harder truth. Mindset is the beginning. Environment is the engine. Rich understand this in ways most never do. They do not just teach their children what to believe. They place them where those beliefs are normal, where those beliefs are reinforced, where success is not an exception, but the expectation. And so I looked at my own life, at the people I spoke with daily, at the places I spent my time, at the voices I allowed into my mind, and I saw something shocking. I was trying to grow a wealthy life in a poor environment, and the soil was fighting my seed. I had to make a choice. Would I protect the comfort of my surroundings, or would I pursue the discomfort of transformation? Wealthy teach their children to guard their environments, to select their peers intentionally, to choose friends who challenge them, to sit at tables where growth is required, to say no to energy that drains, to say yes to voices that build. This was not how I was raised, but it is how I began to raise myself, because I realized that nothing grows in darkness. And poverty is not just financial, it is emotional. It is spiritual, it is social. You can be rich in talent, but poor in support, rich in dreams, but poor in belief, and unless you shift your surroundings, your inner world will eventually shrink back down to match your outer one. So I began seeking rooms that scared me, conversations that stretched me, mentors who challenged me, books that shook me, and slowly the walls of limitation began to crack. The rich do not stumble into powerful environments, they construct them, they protect them, they build them with intention, and they teach their children to do the same. You do not need wealth to shift your environment. You need courage, you need vision, You need to value your future more than your past, because everything you want, everything you believe, everything you are becoming, will either rise or fall depending on where you allow yourself to live. This is not about location, it is about elevation. Choose the environment that elevates you and everything will begin to change. There was a season where I lived one day at a time, not with peace but with panic. Waking up wondering what might go wrong, what bill might arrive, what problem might surprise me, and I noticed something: I was reacting to life, not creating it. That was when I learned one of the greatest rules. The wealthy teach their children a rule. So simple, it almost sounds foolish, but it is. Everything always see ahead. The wealthy teach vision like it is oxygen. They train their children to visualize what they want before they ever touch it. They guide them to imagine outcomes, to feel success before it arrives, to walk through their dreams mentally before they step into them physically. Because what the mind rehearses, the body remembers, and what the body remembers, the future obeys. I had to train this into myself. Every morning I began speaking what I wanted, not what I feared. I began writing down who I was becoming, not just what I had done. I began setting my eyes further than my current struggle, and my struggle began to shrink. Vision is not about fantasy, it is about leadership. It is about showing your mind where to go so it does not wander into weaknesses. Wealthy know that money is drawn to purpose, and purpose is born from vision. When you know where you are going, the noise loses its grip, the doubt loses its voice, and the fear begins to fall away. They teach their children to practice this daily. To sit in silence and imagine, to plan, to build in the mind first, to believe deeply, to commit fully. This is not taught in school, but it is taught in wealthy homes, not with lectures, but with actions. The father who visualizes the company, the mother who visualizes the future, the home that holds space for dreams. That is where power is passed down. You may not have grown up with this kind of guidance, but you are not too late. You can become the visionary. You can become the one who walks ahead of time, who lives today from the future, not the past. That is the habit that reshapes destiny. That is the habit that becomes legacy. It speak it, walk it, and soon you will live it. When I first started my journey, I wanted everything fast: results, now success, now recognition, now. But I quickly learned that speed without structure leads to destruction, and that the rich think differently. They do not chase speed, they master delay. They teach their children that waiting is not weakness, that patience is not punishment, that delay is a discipline, and the discipline of delay creates kings. Remember, when I made my first real income, my first instinct was to reward myself, to spend it, to show the world I had arrived. But the rich do not move that way. They teach a different rhythm: earn, wait, invest, multiply. And you can begin living by this rule today. You do not need more time, you need more intention. You do not need more money, you need more meaning. You do not need to speed up, you need to grow up. That is what delay teaches. That is what legacy requires. Train your mind to wait, with power to pause, with purpose to delay, with design, and you will become the kind of person the future is waiting for. For most of my early life, I never questioned the words I used. I spoke what I heard, I repeated what I was taught, and I lived inside the limitations of that language. I did not understand that words are not just sounds, they are seeds. And every seed creates a result. The wealthy understand this, and they teach their children early: speak like you are already, speak like you have already, speak like you know already. Not because it is fake, but because language shapes belief, and belief shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcome. I had to unlearn the words of limitation, words like I cannot, words like I am not sure, words like I hope, and I started speaking with decision: I will, I am, I know, I create, I move. I spoke differently, I felt differently, and when I felt differently, I acted differently. The rich are fluent in the language of wealth. They use words that create power, that build identity, that anchor belief. They teach their children to speak life, to speak vision, to speak growth. This is not just positive thinking, this is identity programming, because a child who hears power speaks power. A child who hears possibility chooses possibility. A child who hears vision chases vision in. So I began guarding my mouth like a gate. I stopped repeating stories of failure. I stopped echoing the fears of others. I stopped cursing my own future with casual words. The words you speak today become the future you live tomorrow. The inner voice becomes the outer result, and the rich never leave that voice to change. May have grown up around words of fear, but you can begin a new vocabulary. You can introduce your future to a new language, one that says, I deserve, I decide, I drive my life forward with intention, one that speaks with clarity, with command, with courage. This is the voice of wealth, and once you learn to speak it, you can never return to silence. I used to believe that my emotions were truth, that if I felt fear, it meant danger. If I felt doubt, it meant stop. If I felt tired, it meant rest. But the wealthy taught me something different. They taught me that emotion is a message, not a master. They do not run from emotion, but they do not surrender to it. They train for it, they master it. They teach their children that the power is not in how you feel, the power is in what you do. With that feeling, this changed my entire life. I realized that every emotion had energy, but that energy could be directed, it could be converted, it could be used. Fear became focus, anger became fire, sadness became reflection, frustration became fuel. Rich do not avoid discomfort, they lean into it, they harness it, they make it serve them in. That is the rule that separates the average from the elite. The rich teach emotional control like it is currency, because it is your ability to stay calm under pressure, to remain certain when others panic, to think clearly when things feel chaotic, that is worth more than gold. And I had to learn this the hard way. I had to break the cycle of emotional reaction, of quitting when it got hard, of shrinking when it got scary, of exploding when it got stressful. I began to observe instead of obey, to notice instead of kneel, to breathe instead of break. The wealthy know this skill must be built early. They teach it through discipline, through exposure, through example. They do not shelter their children from pressure. They expose them to it in doses so they grow stronger, not suffer. And I taught myself the same way. I leaned into discomfort. I sat in silence. I practiced calm, and I watched as my power returned. You cannot lead your life if you are a slave to emotion. You cannot hold wealth if your spirit leaks. You cannot build legacy if your peace is always on fire. Control your emotions, and you will control your destiny. I used to say I did not have enough time, and every time I said that, my life became more rushed, more scattered, more reactive. Then I studied the rich, and I saw something. They had the same 24 hours I had, but their outcomes were different. Not because of luck, but because of Lotha. Wealthy teach their children that time is not something you have, it is something you direct, something you master, something you mold. Time bends to intention. Time multiplies under clarity. Time expands under structure. Do not allow time to manage them. They manage it like an empire. They block time for thinking. They block time for learning. They block time for investing. They block time for building. And they protect those blocks like treasures. They do not waste time proving. They use time producing. They do not waste time explaining. They use time expanding. And that is when it hit me. Time is not the issue. Identity is. Once I decided that I was not a victim of the clock, I began designing my days. I stopped saying I am busy. I started saying I am building. I stopped saying I do not have time. I started saying this is not a priority, because the truth is we all have time, but not all of us have clarity. And clarity is how the rich convert hours into empires. They teach this early. A child who learns to manage time learns to manage destiny. A child who sees structure builds structure. A child who knows rhythm moves with rhythm. That rhythm creates wealth. I built new rituals, woke up with reason, scheduled my silence, guarded my focus, cut what was not aligned, and expanded what was. I began using my time like currency, spending it only where it could grow. Because wasted time is wasted potential, and the rich never waste either. Time is not running out. Time is waiting for direction. Give it. When I began this journey, I was searching for answers, for secrets, for shortcuts, but what I found was a mirror. Because the number one rule the rich teach their children is this: you do not chase success, you become it. Everything I wanted was waiting, but not for my words, not for my effort, not for my ideas. It was waiting for my identity to rise. The wealthy build from the inside out. They teach their children to focus on who they are becoming, not just what they are doing, because the outer world is always responding to the inner world, and nothing around you can grow until something within you shifts. They do not raise followers, they raise creators. They raise builders. They raise visionaries who are not waiting for permission because they already gave it to themselves. I began to do the same. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I stopped asking for approval. I stopped hiding behind the lie of someday. And I started becoming. The rich do not wish, they work. The rich do not beg. They believe. The rich do not copy. They create. They teach their children that becoming is not about perfection. It is about alignment. Not about having more, but being more. And so I became the person who keeps promises. The person who moves with integrity, the person who shows up when no one is watching, the person who carries vision, even when it is a lie, became the one who does not quit, who does not fold, who does not shrink. And that decision changed everything, because once you become the right person, you attract the right people, you unlock the right rooms, you open the right doors. The rich build legacy through becoming. They teach the next generation to value growth over comfort, discipline over ease, character over applause. And that is what I am teaching myself every day, that the secret is not hidden, it is inside. You are not far, you are one choice away. You are not behind, you are one identity shift from everything. So become not someday but now, not when it is safe but while it is sacred. You are not waiting on the world is waiting on you.